Peeling back the layers, see what's underneath. Let the shadows fade away and finally breathe. We're turning on the light, yeah. We're turning on the light. Exposing all the truth and making everything right. We're turning on the light. Ooh, we're turning on the light. Turning on the light, yeah.
We're going to be talking about, on this episode, of Exposing Truths, and explore the common phrase, America is a democracy, and explain the distinction between a democracy and a republic. I have my opinions on why people call it a democracy, because I think a lot of people want it to be a democracy, a full democracy. I like to call it a republic because we are a republic. So what did our American founders actually create? That's the question. Welcome to Exposing Truth. I'm your host, Keith Nielsen. Today we're going to be tackling the phrase that we hear constantly from our politicians, our media, commentators, educators, and everyday Americans. Is our democracy at stake? You hear it on television, you hear it on political speeches, you hear it on social media, but it raises an important question. Is the United States actually a democracy? Or, as many Americans have heard it repeatedly over the years, are we really a republic? Today we're going to separate the political slogans from the historical reality. We'll look at what the founding fathers actually created, why they created it, and why this debate still matters going into our 250-year anniversary. So grab your coffee, settle in, and let's expose some truths. So why is this conversation, why does it matter? So one of the most common statements you'll hear is America is a democracy. Another common response is no, America is a republic. The truth is that both statements contain part of the same answer. The United States is not a pure democracy where every citizen votes directly on every law and policy, but it's also not a republic in the sense that democracy plays no role. The United States is best described as a constitutional federal republic with democratic institutions. In everyday language, many historians and political scientists say it's a representative democracy. But if that's true, why did American founders avoid creating a pure democracy? And that's where the story actually gets interesting. So what's a democracy? Let's begin with definitions. A pure democracy is sometimes called a direct democracy. It is a system where citizens vote directly on the laws and public policy. The classic example is ancient Athens, where the citizens gathered to vote on issues themselves rather than electing representatives. The strength of a pure democracy is obvious. People directly control government. See, and that's where mob rules. If the majority wants something, it takes it. But the founding fathers of America believed there was a strong danger in pure democracy as well. They feared what they called a tyranny of a majority, a situation where 51% of the people could vote to take away the rights of the other 49%. They believed that freedom required more than just a majority rule, and they believed it required constitutional limits on government power. So what is a republic? A republic is a system where people elect representatives who govern them accordingly, and they establish laws and constitutional principles. Instead of voting directly on every issue, citizens get to choose their leaders who act on their behalf. The United States was designed as a constitutional republic. The Constitution establishes separation of powers, checks and balances, federalism, individual rights protected from government interference, representation through elected officials. The founders intentionally created barriers against concentration of power. So why? Because they had just fought a revolutionary war on unchecked political authority. So what did the founders say? One of the most quoted statements in the debate comes from Benjamin Franklin. After the Constitutional Convention of 1787, Franklin was reportedly asked what form of government did the delegates create. His answer was, a republic if you could keep it. And that quote has become legendary. But Franklin wasn't saying that democracy had no place in America. He was just emphasizing that the Constitution created by the representation system of government governed by law. And James Madison wrote extensively about the dangers of pure democracy. In the Federalist number 10, Madison argued that pure democracy has historically been unstable and vulnerable to fractionism and the majority oppression. Madison wrote that a republic provides a solution for using representation with constitutional structures to refine and enlarge public opinion. In other words, the founders wanted a popular government, but they also wanted a constitutional safeguard as well. Let's talk about the constitutional system. And I think about how our government actually works. We do not vote directly on federal laws. We elect representatives. We do not elect Supreme Court justices. They are appointed. The Constitution itself can't be changed by a simple majority vote. It requires a vigorous amendment process. Originally, senators were selected by the state legislature rather than the direct election, which I'm not sure that was actually a good idea to change that. And even the Electoral College was designed as a layer of representation between the people and the presidency. All of these things featured reflect the Republican principle. At the same time, the people still exercise their democratic powers through elections, representation, petitions, speech, assembly, and participation in government. This is why so many scholars describe America as both a republic and a representative democracy. So why do people say democracy? Well, so politicians and commentators constantly refer to our democracy, and the answer is over time, the word democracy evolved into popular usage. Today, when many Americans say democracy, they don't mean a direct democracy like ancient Athens. They mean a system where people choose their leaders through elections and participate in self-government. In that sense, the term democracy refers to democratic features in our constitutional system. However, critics argue that using the only word democracy can sometimes obscure the Constitution limitations and republic structures that the founders considered essential. And that's why this debate continues today. But why does it matter? This isn't just an argument over vocabulary. It's about understanding the principles about what America was founded. If America was a pure democracy, then majority rule would be nearly absolute. But because America is a constitutional republic, there are limits on what our government and even our majorities can do. Our rights do not depend solely on popular opinion. Freedom of speech, freedom of religion, due process, equal protection under the law. These rights are protected by constitutional structures designed to restrain political power. The founders believed that liberty required both popular participation and constitutional restraint. So, is America a democracy? Yes, in a sense that people govern through elections and representation. Is America a republic? Absolutely, in the sense that our government operates under a constitutional representative institution and limitations on our political power. More accurately, maybe this: America is a constitutional republic that uses democratic processes. And perhaps the larger lesson is labels matter less than principles. The real question is whether we call ourselves a democracy or a republic. The question is whether we understand the constitutional system we've inherited and whether we're willing to preserve it for future generations. I'm Keith Nielsen, and this has been Exposing Truths. Until next time, keep asking questions, keep seeking the truth, and never stop learning.
Peeling back the layers, see what's underneath. Let the shadows fade away and finally breathe. We're turning on the light, yeah. We're turning on the light. Exposing all the truth and making everything right. We're turning on the light.